Let's dig into two Meyer Dussack techniques today, the Bochhau, or the knocking cut, and the Brummerhau, or the roaring cut. These are two techniques with similar problems. The text changes from year to year from simple to complicated, interpretations get oversimplified in face of this difficult text, and there are very few resources online where you can actually compare and contrast. Let's dig into the Bochhau first. This one does have some resources, but the texts are wildly different, from a really simple version in the 68 to complicated in the 70. The most common interpretation is this one, matching the 68, just knocking the sword around. We have others trying to smack the opponent with the hilt in the chest, which is not very great, and others where we're trying to push the sword into our opponent to smack them with our hilt, which has its own difficulties and doesn't tend to work very well. If we take a little bit of time though, we can more closely match the text and find something useful in fencing by taking the text in the 70 and breaking it down into various criteria for success, such as we need to have a sunken body position, cut straight against our opponent, have our hilt on their chest, and press their Dussack against them. If we just start in that position, we can then work backwards and build the technique from there. Now that we know where we're going to end up, we can just cut straight before us with a nice Oberhau to bring us right where we need to be. When we add an opponent back in, this Oberhau compresses their blade really well, and we can bully their sword back into them. We can strike their blade very hard and still end up in that ending position that we started with. We also don't need to go entirely by the book to make this technique work. We can throw it from different guards and have different ending positions for the blade. We just need to bully and test their blade, and the Bochhau lets us knock on that door very strongly. As long as we keep thinking of those criteria for success in our sparring, we can really test our opponent's forward-facing guards and compress them to our advantage. The Bochhau doesn't always have to hit them to be successful. It can just give you a timing or a tempo, or it can delay them for just a moment for you to find another opening with your eyes open as you fence. And as with all things in fencing, it doesn't always work. An opponent who's ready, or they take that pressure away a little bit too quickly, can oftentimes become problematic. In summary, use the Bochhau to bully or test your opponent's bogan and other point forward guards. Lead with the hilt, sink the body with the cut, and keep your peepers peeled as you do it to work from the cut with the pressure that you apply. Let's shift gears and talk about the Brummerhau, or the roaring cut. This cut suffers from the same problems as the Bochhau, with very different textual complexity from one year to the next. The most common interpretation is using the Brummerhau as a flat cut against an opponent whose arm has been driven high. This works fairly well and can be super snappy. The main problem with this is that it ends up with our palm facing open and outwards, and if we don't have a very good grip of our Dussack, it can actually pop out of our hands. We can actually improve this interpretation and add more by looking at the text. It gives us hints to hold the Dussack crooked as we aim with the false edge against their arm. And luckily the 68 references this photo showing the crooked grip to the fencer on our right. Let's just match this grip and start our interpretation from there. We get to the crooked grip simply by starting in bogan and dropping the hilt across the back of our hand. This is easy to do with no glove or light gloves, but can get challenging if you're using something a little bit thicker. However, I found doing the transition with thick gloves during sparring to be not all that bad, as you can see here. We can now do the exact same interpretation, cutting with the flat, but now we have a specific advantage, in that when we cut it, we end up with our palm away, and even holding the Dussack lightly, it won't fall out of our hand or be insecure. However, there's even more to the Brummerhau than just a simple flat cut. I like to use the 68 to provide the illustration for the crooked grip, but I do my interpretation mainly from the 70. I'm going to build a list of criteria for success for this cut too. Starting in our crooked grip, we're just going to pull our Dussack back and then cut from our right side and slightly below our opponent's blade. We can cut from this right and below with the false edge to any part of their arm really. And last, keep the Dussack moving, have it snap around so you're ready to parry. We can start a cut very similar to the flat cut, but instead come from below and flick the tip around to strike the bottom, top, or inside of their arm with the crooked edge of our Dussack. I like to use this flicking motion to hit the side or top of their arm, but you can come straight from below too. The motion's not that different from cutting our flat cut, and it allows us to match the text in that we snap around as if in a wind for the parrying. Using the crooked grip in sparring is great. We can cut the traditional flat cut like this, and this snapping cut's a really good way to enter measure and start to test people's guards when it sticks out forwards. And like the text says, if their arm goes high, pick it. The crooked grip should also not be underestimated. There's a lot of utility to it, and we can do a lot of things with it, such as do thrusts, cuts to different positions, blade beats, and more. Simply unwinding from the crooked grip to hit the head is one of my favorite ways to move through the guard. It can be a way to do sneaky outside thrusts, and you can do both unwinds and the actual snapping motion back to back. I love the crooked grip, and it's a great way to expand your toolbox. The snapping motion is great for space creating and for offense, and it keeps your blade moving just like Meyer wants. And don't forget to mix up techniques from your crooked grip. You don't want to give cues to your opponent that you're only going to do one thing when you're sitting in it. And that's it for the Bochhau and the Brummerhau. Thank you for watching, and if you try these two things out, let me know how it goes down in the comments. I would love to hear if you find anything that works super well and totally clicks. And of course, a project like this is never done alone. Big shouts out to everyone who helped out, like Eric and James at Lonin, Keith and Ian helping out with that video example, Jason for some proofreading, and everyone else who's helped me with this interpretation over the last few months. Thank you so much!